Welcome members, officers, honorary aldermen and any members of the public viewing at home this evening to this council meeting. Please be seated. There is no fire drill planned for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please make your way from the chamber using either the fire escape to my right or via the stairwell that leads off of the lobby outside the chamber. Members, as you will see, there is a lot on the agenda this evening. Please feel free to get more water or take breaks as necessary. Item 1. Ms Willis, may I have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've received apologies from Councillor Sashi Marvaganam and Councillor David Whitcroft.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes. Moving on to item agenda 2, I propose that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 13th of December 2023 be approved as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to second that motion. Thank you.
Is that agreed, members? Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest to declare in relation to the matters which are to be considered at this evening's meeting? May I remind you that the Members' Code of Conduct specifically refers to you being able to vote on the council tax setting and setting members' allowance. So there is no need to declare an interest for these items. No. There's no declarations. Item agenda 5. I am advised that 8 questions have been received from members of the public under Council Procedure Rule 10. We have received the questions from 2 members of the public. The public speaking rules would normally require members of the public asking more than one question to prioritise a first question. This is so everyone can have a chance to speak, to ask at least one question, and the time is allocated to 30 minutes. However, as 6 of the questions will be asked by one member of the public, and the first member of the public would be entitled to ask a second question, I have judged it would be more efficient to hear both questions from the first member of the public. I will therefore be taking the questions in this order. Both questions from Zilla Chester and the questions then from T. Fahad. Please can I ask that any supplementary questions avoid long statements so that we can hear as many questions as possible. If we are not able to get through all the questions in 30 minutes allocated, we may need to defer any outstanding questions to the next appropriate council meeting. I've been advised that the Residents and Community Services portfolio holder will respond to all of the questions. Can I have question 1, please?
Mayor.
I'd like to see.
Yes. Why is the council...
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I'm Zilla Chester.
Zilla Chester.
I'm resident of
Would
Frimley...
you like to read out your first question?
I will, thank you, Mayor. Why is the council considering introducing charges in Frimley Park Lodge when obesity is such an issue at the moment and many people of all ages take exercise and enjoy the facilities of the park free of charge?
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question. The council is very proud of the parks and green spaces within the borough. 4 of our parks have been awarded the prestigious green flag status, 2 of which are our flagship parks, Frimley Lodge and Lightwater Country Park. We are confident we will be able to increase this into more venues in future years. Our parks across the borough are well utilised for exercise and general well-being. Watchetts Park, for example, is a sports hub within the borough with permanent clubhouses for Camberley Rugby Club and Frimley Tennis Club. The council has recently upgraded its tennis courts within Watchetts Park with the assistance of the Lawn Tennis Association. Frimley Green Recreation Ground has also benefited from a similar tennis court upgrade and is having gym equipment installed in the next couple of weeks. We operate an ongoing maintenance programme to allow the continuation of the upgrade of children's play equipment across the borough. Moving on to Frimley Lodge, the trim trail equipment has been replaced recently, in addition to the disabled swing installed only a few years ago. It is also home to the miniature railway and local football clubs who play all year round on the Astro pitches. We have recently been through the procurement process to grant new leases of the cafes at both the Lodge and Lightwater Country Park, and now both offer perfect coffee and tasty, healthy snacks. The Basingstoke Canal runs along the back of the park, with bridges allowing access to the Basingstoke Canal Centre, its cafe, and the woods of Mitchett Heath. The park has also hosted events such as Surrey Heath Show and the Community Platinum Jubilee and Coronation celebrations. Living in Frimley Green, my own children, and now grandchildren, enjoy a Sunday afternoon on the railway and feeding the ducks. We can often be found walking the dogs through the park, across the canal, and through Mitchett Heath. The council contractors maintain the park, which is kept to an excellent standard, contributing to a superb green space for residents of Surrey Heath and beyond. I would like, as you will be aware, the answers to these questions are published prior to the meeting. I am going to make a small change to the following paragraph. This council does not charge and has absolutely no plans to charge for the entrance to our green spaces. They remain free for all ages to enjoy as they wish, including for exercise. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Chester, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, I would please, Councillor Whitcroft. Does that mean then that in future, say any time in the future or after the next election, you do intend to introduce parking charges to Frimley Lodge Park? Or could you give a cast iron guarantee that you won't?
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've noted within the parking strategy, the situation with the lodge is that we believe there are safety issues down there. At this stage, we cannot make commitment one way or the other until we have received and undertaken our business study and heard from external surveyors as to the extent of the problems down there. We will, of course, once we've done that, provide further information.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Chester, would you like to read out your second question?
Thank you, Mayor. Does the council think that raising parking charges in the town centre in Camberley will overall help the budget or in other areas? For those of us who live in Frimley Green, for example, it's cheaper to go to Farnborough to shop as parking is less expensive there. Increases in parking charges in Camberley would be detrimental to the footfall in the town centre. This would result in shops closing, less revenue to the council from shop rents in the mall. As someone who lived in Camberley for many years before moving to Frimley Green, I'd be very upset to see Camberley diminish further.
Can the portfolio holder please respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the council does believe that increasing the parking charges will generate much needed funds for the car parks to complete the backlog of repairs, to maintain them going forward and improve the residents' experience. This also reduces the burden on local taxpayers who may not be car users from having to subsidise the cost of operating the car parks for those that do. The council's economic development team were consulted on the proposed tariffs and were very clear that the positive impact of improvements such as safety, cleanliness and simplicity, etc., would benefit the town centre. The increase of parking charges supports improving the experience of visiting the town centre, along with other civic amenity investments, as a wider part of regeneration in the long term. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Chester, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please. I'd like to ask about the figures from the Council's Economic Development team. How are these calculated in terms of revenue for car parking in the future? On what basis were they calculated? How do you know you'll be receiving more money?
Thank you. Would the portfolio holder like to respond to that question?
I would like to pass that to Mr Stevens, please.
Mr Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. So in relation to the estimates that have been made for parking income, that hasn't been made by our economic development team. That's been made by our parking services manager in consultation with colleagues. So there is a best professional estimate that's been used. That has been based on previous evidence from Surrey Heath specifically. So as an example, we had an increase in parking charges 2 years ago. We looked at the data and the trend data in relation to the increase in charges at that point in time, and it showed no sustained change in customer behaviour.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr Stevens. She can have quite supplementary, can't she?
No, that wasn't.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Stevens, and thank you, Ms Chester, for your questions. Question 3. Ms Fayard, would you like to read out your first question?
Thank you, Mayor. 1,500 residents signed an e-petition asking the council not to proceed with further parking restrictions. In particular, they want the 1 hour free parking at the pay-on-foot car parks. This is crucial as people use, for example, the Wolf Road car park when they have a GP appointment or need to purchase medication from Boots Pharmacy. Businesses in the villages are worried that reducing the 1 hour free parking to 30 minutes means less customers and less revenue for them. Can the council justify how the 1 hour free parking will not adversely impact local businesses and residents, such as those in Frimley Green, especially those in the villages, and would instead support their businesses and community life? And I have to correct this, how the 30 minutes parking will not. So the reduction of 1 hour to 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Please can the resident and community services portfolio holder respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the question. Car parks are a discretionary service and inherently expensive for the council to own and maintain. With increasing costs associated with the running and maintaining of these car parks, the council could not afford to do this without generating sufficient income to pay for them. The previous administration increased charges in April of 2022 and used none of this income to support the car parks. This simply compounds the negligence on the part of the previous Conservative administration. Had they made regular payments and improvements to the car parks, we would not be in the shocking position we are now. While everyone, including me, would prefer not to pay for parking, the charges are broadly in line with other neighbouring councils, and it is right that the people that use our car parks should pay to do so as opposed to increasing council tax. I also know that residents would want the car parks to be safe and easy to use. However, that said, in your position as chair of the local Conservative Party, I'm sure you are aware the Doctor's Surgery in Frimley Green has its own car park. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Fayard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. First of all, I just want to clarify I'm not the chair of the local Conservative Party, whilst I'm involved with my local branch, but not the Conservative Association. The chair of the Conservative Association, sorry, Heath is someone else. Secondly, my question is that when I was listening to the previous meetings, recordings on YouTube, I noted that submissions were made that the previous administration had spent about £1.5 million towards repair and maintenance of car parks. And I just wanted to, if you can be specific about what type of maintenance work was not carried out and what extra funding is required for maintenance, and also from the submissions that you made, Councillor Whitcroft. So do you agree that introduction of these parking tariffs is indeed going to adversely impact businesses and residents? Thank you.
Would the portfolio holder like to respond to the question?
Yes, could I pass the technical elements of the questions over to Mr Stevens, please?
Mr Stevens?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I feel very rude having my back to you on answer. If I may, because it's quite a complex question in relation to the capital expenditure, I'd like to be able to provide a written answer if possible.
7 days?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Thank you, Mr Stevens. And you will have a response within 7 days. Question 4. Ms Fiard, would you like to read out your second question?
Thank you, Mayor. What financial or non-financial support will you provide to businesses and communities adversely affected by further parking restrictions? For example, to those who may have less customers following the reduction of 1 hour free parking to 30 minutes, and would not the cost of such support require a further increase in council tax?
Thank you. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. Once again, car parks are a discretionary service provided by the council for the benefit of residents and local businesses. These improvements represent a huge contribution to the local economy and the vitality of our town and village areas. If Conservatives such as yourself really cared about businesses in Surrey Heath, then they would not take 91.7% of all business rates away from this borough and local communities, but instead would allow us to keep more to invest in the economic development and resident services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Fiard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Well, I would like to have the figures that you've provided, evidence of that. I don't have that. However, my question is that, so from your statement and response, are you saying that there's actually no support available for any businesses, for any business that is going to suffer financially from the introduction of the 30 minutes parking?
Would the portfolio holder like to respond to the question?
Thank you. Again, the technical information would need to come from Mr Stevens, and the figures that you require, again, will need to come under the 7-day rule. Mr Stevens, did you want to pick the technical elements up now?
If I may, Madam Mayor, we'll provide the response in 7 days.
We will get a response within 7 days. Question 5. Would you like to read out your third question?
Thank you, Mayor. People who walk slowly due to physical issues would hardly be able to park, walk to shop, do their shopping and walk back to the car park within 30 minutes. Do you agree that the reduction of 1 hour free parking to 30 minutes is an indirect discrimination against those who walk slowly? Do you also agree that making all car parks contactless would mean the elderly or those not carrying cards, phones with them would be discriminated against? Thank you, Mayor.
Holder, respond to the question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Council is committed to promoting equality and accessibility in relation to all the services it provides. The Executive Report and the Parking Strategy have both expressly addressed any equality implications. An equalities impact assessment has been produced which does not indicate a direct impact on any specific group of people with protected characteristics. We are committed equally for all users within our car parking facilities. We will ensure that we have sufficient disabled and parent and toddler bays across our parking portfolio and prioritise the safety and convenience of our customers. Within the parking strategy, we have committed to an in-depth assessment of the current provision. This will include blue badge signage and other necessary infrastructure, ensuring that the facilities are fully accessible and adjusting our plans so we meet the standards of inclusivity. Sorry, I can't do that one. We are dedicated to installing call and help points on every level within our multi-storey parking structures. These strategically placed points will not only provide aid and guidance to visitors, but also enhance the overall security and accessibility of our facilities. It is our intention to continue to provide and improve the provision of larger bays closer to the entrances of all our car parks at no additional cost. Evidence has shown the use of cash is dwindling following the pandemic. I am confident that anyone who has the capability to drive a car is also able to use a phone or use contactless payments. In removing the need for cash, we are removing the need to find individual fiddly coins and increasing users' personal safety. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Fiard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. So a person who drives a car and whose bank account perhaps have been blocked or frozen, or who doesn't have a card with them and usually uses and relies on cash, would not be able to use the contactless machine. Whilst everyone who drives is of the intelligence to understand how to use a contactless payment, but that doesn't mean that they would necessarily have the contactless card with them. So do you still agree or disagree that use of contactless all across car parks in Surrey Heath is going to be discriminatory? Thank you, Mayor.
Would the portfolio holder like to respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say that the first example you gave, there will continue to be the current app that are on these machines, and also the use of cash. So the fact that the contactless facility could not be accessible by a bank card that's blocked, then clearly is not a problem, because we, as I say, there is a facility for cash and for the current app that we have. So no, I'm afraid I don't believe it discriminatory.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Question 6. Ms Fiard, would you like to read your fourth question?
Thank you, Mayor. What systems and procedures do you have in place to assess the impact of the introduction of further parking restrictions as set out in the parking strategy and approved by the Executive Committee on 13th of February 2024 on local businesses, especially shops and cafes in the villages and local communities?
Please can the Resident and Community Services portfolio holder respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Council will continue to monitor car park usage levels and footfall data for our car parks and use this to inform its future management. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Fiard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Well, that doesn't answer the question in terms of monitoring the impact on the businesses. It says that you will monitor car park usage, but car park usage isn't exactly the same as going and use a local business or going and buying, for example, a coffee from a local cafe. So is there any system or is there not any system to monitor the impact on the businesses? So that would require working with the local businesses and actually monitoring their revenue rather than monitoring just the level of usage of car parks. Thank you.
Would the portfolio holder like to respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst directly there is no figures as such to indicate the usages of the business, we do have regular contact with associations such as the Camberley Business Association through Love Camberley, who would obviously pass on their observations in that respect. However, I'd also point out that, as is today, the number of car park users is obviously, you need to park your car in the same way then as you do now to use those businesses. So that would indicate that the footfall would therefore indicate the same number of people going through as are today. So should the footfall drop, then obviously the use of the businesses will drop. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Question 7, Ms Viard, would you like to read out your 5th question?
Would you confirm if you're using 2 separate companies for car park charging apps? If so, would you not save more costs by using only one company and pay less administration costs?
Will the Resident and Community Services portfolio holder respond to the question?
There is one app used within our town centre car parks and a different app for other locations. Therefore, the costs associated are simply shared between the 2 providers. The apps currently attract a 20% surcharge per transaction for the residents. The new contactless machines give the opportunity for residents to pay electronically without incurring the additional administration charge levied by the app company, thus saving money from the situation today. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Viard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. So can you please just clarify where you say that that's saving money versus today? Do you mean the council is saving money or the residents are saving money by using the app? Because my question related to the council saving funds by using only one company rather than 2 companies and paying 2 administration costs perhaps or other expenses to the companies. Thank you.
Would the portfolio holder like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over keen there. I would refer back to the beginning of the answer to my question when I said that there is one app used within the town centre and one app used for other locations. So if we were to use one company, we would still be paying the same amount as each of the 2 apps at the moment. We are paying half. So therefore, the amount would not change. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Question 8. Ms Viard, would you like to read out your 6th question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm told by residents that parents use Frimley Lodge Park's car park when their children use various local clubs, such as football club. Do you agree that if any parking charges are introduced in future at Frimley Lodge Park, that these families may not choose to register their children as such clubs? Those who use the park for recreation and exercise would think twice before going to the park and walk or run in the park.
Please can the Resident and Community Services portfolio holder respond to the question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Council does not currently have any proposals to introduce charges at Frimley Lodge Park, so the question is not relevant. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. Ms Viard, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. The parking strategy says that you would require further assessment and development of a detailed business case for Frimley Lodge Park and also Lightwater Country Park. Do you agree that by requiring detailed assessment and a business case, you're in fact considering whether or not parking charges should be introduced? And if such, a business case requires or suggests that parking tariffs should be introduced, that you're in fact going to introduce parking tariffs in Friendly Lodge Park? Thank you, Mayor.
Would the portfolio holder like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would refer back to my answer to the very first question, but go on to say that the utmost priority of this council has to be the safety of our residents when using our facilities. I personally, and I'm sure I speak for most in this room, would not like to live with the thought that we are asking and allowing residents to use car parks that are unsafe. For that reason, the business case, as I've already stated both within the strategy and this evening, the business case is being explored, but at this point we're unable to comment any further. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft, and thank you, Ms Fiard, for your questions. Agenda item 5, my announcements. Firstly, I start with 2 sad announcements for the Council. I'm sorry to inform you that Alderman Keith Bush died at the end of January. Keith was a councillor between 1999 and 2015, representing the West End ward during that time. He also served as a parish councillor for West End. Keith was mayor in 2006-7, having been deputy mayor the previous year. He was also a member of the executive for several years. He received the honour of being conferred as an alderman in 2015. On behalf of the council, I send our condolences to his wife Sue and his family. I'm also sorry to announce the passing of former councillor Mrs Pat Pearce. Pat represented Heatherside Ward between 1995 and 2011. She was mayor in 2000 to 2001, and having been deputy mayor the previous year. She also served a second term as mayor. She was the first mayor ever to have done that in 2007 and 2008. She has previously chaired the Environment Committee of the Council. I also extend the Council's condolences to Pat's family and friends, and I'd ask the Council to stand for a minute's silence, please. Business to get through. I'd just like to go back to our November council meeting and the November 12th Remembrance Service, where there seems to be a misunderstanding by some of the councillors and members of the public. The Remembrance Service is arranged in the main by RBL and the church, with very valuable support from this council. And quite correctly, if the council chooses to not to waive the charge, then it can be called a civic service, although we all think of it as the remembrance service when we remember those that have fallen. The church collection is given to the RBL, which is great, and it's gone to the RBL. But the good news is that I'm sure a lot of you will be pleased to hear that Camberley, and they have a very small branch since the loss of Derek Franklin, Camberley raised 28,000 for the poppy appeal this year, and Surrey County raised over 1 million. So thank you for all the support that you gave to the poppy appeal, because it was a great success for us all. That doesn't take us away from the Mayor's civic service. The Mayor's civic services helps the Mayor's charity, which is Sight for Surrey, which is used by a lot of members people in the borough, and it makes good links, good networking, and it has been this Mayor's service has been denied as cost is, I understand, believed to be frivolous. The only cost will have been a small amount of admin. So that's it is with regret that there has been no Mayor's service, because it is something also to share allegiance to our King. So other than that, I've done lots of visits, been lots of places, met lots of wonderful people that do lots of wonderful jobs for nothing. And if we didn't have them, I don't know how we would actually get on in this borough or any other borough. And if anybody wants to know exactly what I've been doing, it's on the Mayor's Facebook. Thank you. Item Agenda 6, I would like to invite the leader, Councillor Sean McDonald, to make his announcements.
Thank you, Mayor. Members, this is a particularly busy agenda, so I'll keep my announcements relatively brief, and I'm sure there will be unanimous support for that approach, at least tonight. Firstly, I'm pleased that tonight we will be agreeing on our new council strategy, delivering for you and a fairer society, and setting the first budget and medium-term financial strategy of our 4-year term. Both of these, together with the annual plan agreed by Executive last week, represent a major step forward for the Council and a significant amount of hard work by members and officers over many months. Subject to your decisions this evening, this work will ensure that despite the many challenges we face, the Council will start the new 2024-2025 financial year in a much stronger position to deliver on the priorities of our residents. However, this important milestone should be seen very much as work in progress. This is because there is more I believe we need to do. Firstly, we need to complete the recruitment of the new financial structure agreed by the Executive in October. In this regard, I'm very pleased to welcome Vicky Worsfold, our new Strategic Finance Manager and Deputy Section 151 Officer, who started with the Council this month. I know that she has been working with the Council ahead of her arrival to help facilitate the successful recruitment to the other key posts in the team. I'm sure Mr. Watson is already valuing her support and expertise. Secondly, we also need to invest time and resources into completing a review of all of our reserves and minimum revenue provisions in the context of the very real financial risk that the Council faces ahead, assessing the impact of our finances of moving forward with our regeneration plans, given the dramatic collapse in the value of the retail properties since purchased, ensuring that the Council's financial position and historic practices are made fully transparent to the public by publishing all the outstanding financial accounts as soon as possible. Together, these actions will give the Council a much clearer view on which to plan its future spend prudently for the benefit of all its residents. Members, having personally called out the financial iceberg heading our way last September and taken ownership with my executive colleagues to slow its approach by an extra year through actions taken in this budget, and despite Truss's best chaotic efforts to hit us below the waterline, we have created the space to navigate the transformation route for the Council to our desired destination. with income and expenditure routinely balanced each year. This transformation route will be the shared objective of the executive and senior officer team in the year ahead to both map out and start movement towards. Moving on to other matters, I'm pleased to be welcoming back the LGA Peer Challenge team on the 16th of April. They will be undertaking a follow-up visit following their in-depth review in July last year. They'll be focusing on our progress with the Executive Action Plan agreed in November. As part of our commitment to transparency, we'll be making public any further feedback they may have. I also wanted to confirm that following approval in September of the Council's Armed Forces Covenant, we will be holding the official signing event with representatives of serving military personnel, veterans, reservists, and service spouses and children. This event is taking place on Wednesday, the 20th of March, from 4 p.m. in the Council Chamber, and all members are welcome to attend. Members, focusing on our people for a few moments, we know that our contact centre relies on having staff who have a deep knowledge of the inherent complexities of local government services and our local structures and processes. That's why I'm particularly pleased to acknowledge that 2 of our customer services advisors in the contact centre, who both started on the same day in 2014, are now celebrating 10 years with the Council. Thank you from all of us on behalf of all the residents you have helped to date. As part of our commitment to service improvement and growing our own within the Council's workforce, I'm pleased to confirm that since the last Council meeting, 9 of our staff have gained professional qualifications relevant to their roles. These include an environmental health officer securing her status as a chartered practitioner, the head of planning completing his strategic leadership programme in modern local government, both a senior contract manager and a senior green space officer securing a certificate for the inspections of children's playgrounds, a communication officer successfully completed her certificate in leadership communications, both a benefits officer and one of our revenues officer gained an Institute of Revenue Rating and Valuation Diploma Level 3, a principal building control surveyor achieved a certificate of competence in building and a building control licence, and lastly, our regeneration manager qualified as a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Congratulations to all the highly motivated and talent achievers listed. As this is the last full Council meeting of the 2023-24 financial year, I want to take this opportunity to thank our officers and members for everything they have done and achieved this year, and for the difference each of you have made to the lives and life chances of our residents. Members, I think we would recognise the heaviest burden falls on the senior team at this time of year, so a special call out to the Chief Executive and his direct reports. Lastly, there's an opportunity for me to remind everyone that this coming April will mark the start of the 50th anniversary year of Surrey Heath Borough Council. We will shortly be publishing a programme of activities to mark this important time in our borough's history and to encourage everyone to get involved. Thank you, Mayor.
Repeat that again.
Moving on to agenda item 7, executive committees and other bodies. Executive minutes and recommendations. Can I have a proposer for the executive minutes and recommendations at minute 70/E and 81E, please?
I'd like to propose, Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Happy to second those minutes, Mayor.
Thank you. Are you happy to receive these minutes and agree the recommendations? Thank you. Can I have a proposer for the planning application committee minutes?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would like to second the minutes from the 21st December 23 and the 25th of January 24.
Thank you. Members, are you happy with these minutes? Can I have a proposer for the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the minutes for the Performance and Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 15th of November and the 24th of January.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to second the minutes of the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of November 2023 and the 24th of January 2024.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Can I have a proposal for the External Partnership Select Committee minutes?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mayor, I'll second them.
Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Audit Standards and Risk Committee. Can I have a proposal for the Audit Standards and Risk Committee minutes?
I'm happy to propose those minutes, Mayor.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Mayor.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Can I have a proposal for the Employment Committee minutes?
I'm happy to propose, Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second.
Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Can I have a proposal for the Licensing Committee minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the minutes from the meeting that took place on the 7th of February 2024.
Do you have a seconder, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second.
Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Joint Staff Consultative Group. Can I have a proposal for the notes of the Joint Staff Consultative Group?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to propose the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 11th of January 2024.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second.
Members, are you happy to receive these notes? Item 8. Members, before we start the debate, can I remind you that the rules of debate about the number of times you may speak are in the Constitution, and the Chief Executive and his officers will advise as necessary. Once the budget has been introduced, proposed and seconded, you will be invited to debate the budget. Any amendments to the budget must be moved and seconded, then debated. Once an amendment has been moved and seconded, you can only debate that amendment. Anyone wanting to move an amendment can speak for up to 8 minutes. Anyone speaking in the debate, including seconding the amendment, can speak up to 5 minutes. Anyone seconding any proposal must speak immediately after seconding that proposal, and they have no right of reply. And I would like to invite the Performance and Finance Portfolio Holder to introduce the report on the annual revenue, budget and medium-term financial strategy, and then move a proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Do you have a seconder?
I'd like to second the motion, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor McIntyre, I now invite you to speak to your proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. So every single person in this chamber, our residents and businesses, have all been impacted by the last 18 months' worth of global instability, which has led to significant financial pressures we now find ourselves under. Cost of living increases pose a significant challenge whether you employ people, provide voluntary services, or run a household budget. Inflation has started to come down from its record high, but the damage has been done, as a reduction in inflation does not mean costs are coming down. Instead, the 10% inflationary uplift that we have had is now baked into our cost base. Sustained increases in interest rates have made tight budgets unsustainable, and we are constantly hearing nationally of retail outlets going into administration with loss of jobs. The Council are not immune from this. As an employer, landlord, provider of statutory and discretionary services, the Council is legally obligated to set a balanced budget each year, and that means that the cost of services has to be balanced with funding mechanisms. This process, which I must thank our officers and fellow portfolio holders and all that members of the teams that have run with it so diligently, has taken a line-by-line review of all income lines and all expenditure. We have taken the approach of service lines having to absorb the additional costs and having the responsibility to generating the efficiencies. The costs which have been absorbed include inflationary uplifts in contracts of over 1.3 million, employment costs for an additional 300,000, corrections to the minimum revenue provision payments of 234,000, inflationary costs of services at 1.3 million, and service demands and a reduction of income of 2.3 million. We have also ensured that revenue grants of 180,000 are now in the base budget, rather than having to rely on the luck of decreasing levels of grant funding. Meanwhile, we've been able to protect the provision of major services. This budget has taken £4.7 million of growth and £4.5 million of efficiencies, resulting in a draw on reserves of £2.6 million for 2024-25. So how are we intending to fund the growth in the cost base? Well, our levers are significantly limited. We've opted to abide by the principle of user pays in order to protect the services which are needed by the most vulnerable in our community. These services, which are increasingly in demand and under strain. Despite having over £37 million of business rates coming into the borough, we pay out 50% to central government, 10% to Surrey County Council, and then the 40% that we should keep is subject to additional levelling up tariffs, which leaves us with just over 8%. So from the initial £37 million that comes into the borough, we retain just £3 million. It is really quite depressing that the effect of levelling up, put in place by the Conservatives in 2019, and now run by our very own MP, Michael Gove, certainly equates to levelling down for our own residents. And the fairer funding review, announced by DLUC, will have a further negative impact on our residents by around £600,000 per year. And this is in addition to the business rate reset, which is also likely to be a further £500,000 to £1 million reduction to business rates, which will stay in our community. The direction of travel is clear. Business rates are going to continually be pillaged from areas perceived to be affluent, but which, in reality, do not have the funds to maintain its local services for residents without accessing reserves. That has left us with no choice other than to bake in the maximum permitted council tax rise of 2.99% or £7.20 for Band D properties, whilst our residents are also getting hit by council tax rises of 4.99% from the County Council, 4.2% from Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, and the parishes increasing their precepts from between 6.2% and 44%, other than Bisley, who's managed to reduce their total precept by 2.9%. Again, Surrey Heath Borough Council only retains 11% of council tax payments. 74% goes to the County Council, with 14% going to the Police and Crime Commissioner. In addition, planning fees are also being decreased. It's important to understand that planning fees cannot make a profit. They can only cover costs. And so it's clear that the planning services to date have been heavily subsidised by residents who don't need to use the service or don't want to. Capital expenditure is also, to be quite frank, hugely frustrating. Within the £10 million of planned spend, we have £2.5 million simply to remove asbestos and £2 million for roof refurbishments. And there are still other risks within our budget aside from the interest rate risks. We have 2 major contracts up for renewal within this medium-term financial strategy. We have a number of unknowns still remaining in terms of capital infrastructure work. And whilst we've managed to buy another year in the medium-term financial strategy before the general fund reserve gets to an amount deemed to be below the minimum acceptable level, the fact remains that the council is still spending more than is coming in, with no reasonable way to increase income to the level needed. We have retail rental income set at a level which we believe to be realistic, albeit with some stretch. But retail is still on a downward trajectory, which could affect our numbers. We have signalled a further drain on the interest rates equalisation reserve, and as a naturally cautious person on these topics, I hope, although I don't predict, that these are too prudent. Every 1% of interest rate movement is the equivalent of £200,000 per annum. So talking about reserves, A reminder to anyone reading our documents that the reserves figure, which looks nice and healthy, is not a cash balance to plug the gap. Whilst we do have £70 million in cash and cash equivalents, which will keep us solvent, the remaining reserves are made up of IOUs where the cash allocated into the earmarked reserves has been borrowed to fund previous expenditure. And this is the internal borrowing line you can see within the report. The result being that for every pound that we take from reserves, we will have to take out additional funding. And whilst this means that we haven't taken out loans when we've had available cash, it does mean that our liabilities will increase. The borrowing that we take out now is at a higher rate, and our funding to balance the budget today will have to be paid for by future generations. And we should not forget that in order to replenish these reserves, we need to be back in a position where income exceeds expenditure. And because we anticipate that any uplift from government funding will be limited, it is fundamental that users pay for the discretionary services they receive. As a council, we look favourably on capital expenditure which sits in the invest to save category. That's to say, where upfront capital investment results in longer-term reduction in running costs and expenses, which are recognised within the useful economic life of that investment, such as the PV installation on Places Leisure Centre. We know that there are likely to be more of these opportunities, and we will determine which projects can be initiated on a case-by-case basis, with the full individual business cases being proposed and determined on their own merits over the course of the MTFS. To summarise, this budget is in place to deliver on the must-do items, the programmes which are needed to meet health and safety standards, items which have got to get sorted in order to allow us to make the transformational changes in the future and ensure that the council is sustainable. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor MacDonald, would you like to exercise your right to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, today we look for your approval for our new 5-year council strategy, delivering for you and a fairer society, and our annual budget that enables the first step on that journey together as one Surrey Heath community. This administration is not afraid to be transparent with residents about the challenges we currently face, nor the tough decisions we need to make, particularly to make our finances sustainable. As we know, honesty is always the best policy to build trust between people. Councillors, this administration will always be guided by enduring liberal values in our actions, to build and safeguard a fair, free and open society in which we seek to balance the fundamental values of liberty, equality and community, and in which no one shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity. Simply put, we want people to be the best they can be and aim to remove any barriers they come across in order to pull them up, not push them down, bring people together, not separate them apart, empower communities, not marginalise them, build one Surrey Heath that all can be welcome in and proud of. Councillors, the trust placed in us by the electorate in May last year is never forgotten and comes to life in the 5 themes of our new strategy. Protect our environment, promote healthier and more inclusive communities, support a strong economy and create more homes, campaign for residents, deliver effective services with sustainable finances. Our budget decisions have looked to move forward in each of these areas whilst being pulled backwards by the inherited debt mountain from the reckless retail property investments, a significant catch-up of overdue asset repairs and maintenance gifted to us, and the impact of Trussonomics, which personally alone I would put at over 3 million for this borough council, or roughly £75 per household. Councillors, I am especially proud of our budget-enabled annual plan actions to accelerate movement towards net zero through solar panel investment at Places Leisure initially and other sites to come. Upgrading of the litter bins across the borough to encourage recycling and smarten our street scenes. Drive forward improvements in biodiversity on our land and any approved property developments. improve play and fitness facilities for all ages in Mitchett, Bagshot, Frimley and Lightwater. Create a new vision for the arts, heritage and culture activities, making it a more vibrant part of our town's offering. Coordinate targeted community safety improvements with our local partners, especially in addressing violence against women and girls with Surrey Police. Encourage equity across all aspects of the work of the council, particularly as we celebrate the rich diversity of communities in the borough on its 50th anniversary, which our new mayor will champion. Build on our bond of faith, that of support for life, for them and their families, for all those who served their country through the Armed Forces Covenant. Progress the local plan to provide the framework for responsible development whilst protecting what is best in Surrey Heath, our natural environment. Develop the processes, systems and people within the council to provide cost-effective, value-for-money services for residents and businesses through motivated and engaged colleagues. Continue to campaign for residents to keep Frimley Park Hospital in the borough and not lose it elsewhere. Receive compensation from Thames Water for the Camberley stink and reconnect Lightwater and Bagshot as quickly as possible. Improve Camberley Town Centre as the local destination of choice through repairs to the square roof, community safety and ambience improvements in Arnold Walk area, and the first step in the former House of Fraser regeneration through asbestos removal. And lastly, demonstrating our multi-year full support to our valued voluntary partners in Citizen Advice Surrey Heath Age Concern, the Hope Hub, Voluntary Support North Surrey, making sure those in need of help get it. Councillors, we will be having a general election this year, though perhaps not too soon after last week's results. And we should not forget that the careless, historic choices we have seen in Surrey Heath have been replicated recklessly by the same team nationally. Just as Surrey Heath voted for hope and change in 2023 at the local level, it must vote the same way in 2024 nationally to avoid deeper recession and despair and to put the needs of the many first whilst protecting the vulnerable few. Councillors, this budget is focused on what we committed to in our manifesto: building sustainable finances, supporting those most in need, building communities together, protecting our quality of life, empowering residents. Councillors, I have no hesitation in seconding this motion and take the opportunity to thank Councillor McIntyre, the executive, and many members for their hard work in getting to this point today. I would also like to thank...
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I'm advised that you are out of time.
Can I finish one sentence? Is that possible?
If it's just one, yes.
Yeah, fine. Councillors, a Liberal of Lochaber with the largest geographic constituency in the country once said, quality of life begins at home. It's in your street, around your community. This strategy, this annual plan, this budget does that, just that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
I'm just thinking about Lisa's got a hand up. I don't know if it's a point of order.
Councillor Lisa Finan-Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I would like to commend Councillor McIntyre, Mr Watson and everybody else who's been involved in putting together the budget. It's a huge piece of work and...
Sorry, I've just been advised that I need to stop you at this point. You will obviously have a moment to speak later. I would now like to ask members to discuss the proposal and make any comments.
Do I have any speakers?
Councillor Lisa Finan-Cook.
Apologies, Mayor, for my eagerness. I'll start from the start, though, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Firstly, thank you, Councillor McIntyre, Mr Watson and everybody else who's been involved in putting together the budget. It is a huge piece of work and I don't think any of us really understand the blood, sweat and tears that goes into putting together this item. One of the most important elements of this administration, as reflected in the annual plan, is our commitment to understand our community, delivering the services they need and creating a culture of true equity. The new Achieving Equity strategy created by this administration ensures inclusion and true equity for all minority groups living and working in Surrey Heath, and it was developed in partnership with representatives from these groups. This spirit of partnership working and really listening and understanding what people want and need is something which I believe sets this administration apart from those who have come before. It was so important to us to find a way to keep the Youth Council going, following its funding being cut to the bone last year. We understand that young people who form the Youth Council are our future. And in fact, we have members in this chamber this evening who came through the Youth Council scheme, proving just how vital it is in terms of engaging young people with local politics and teaching the skills and confidence to enable young people to campaign for their communities. We were delighted to be able to identify funds to keep this project alive and to show our young people that they're important to us and that we appreciate their value. Within this budget, the Lib Dem administration commits to a further 4 years guaranteed funding for Citizens Advice Surrey Heath, to a further 4 years guaranteed funding for the Hope Hub, a further 2 years guaranteed funding for both Surrey Heath Age Concern and VSNS. This is evidence of the Lib Dem's approach to looking after residents of Surrey Heath by committing to funding the services which are a vital lifeline to so many. Within this budget, the most vulnerable in our society are supported through the grants we're giving. They're often forgotten in times of budgetary pressures when every penny counts. And we agree that every penny counts and every penny will be spent on providing these services is well spent. This will be the hallmark of this administration. We deliver on our manifesto promises. They're not simply forgotten once election time is over. The Lib Dems achieve what they set out to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Cope, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Shortly after winning last year's election, the Leader of the Council issued a statement that the Council could be facing effective bankruptcy in as little as 2 years. Despite the rather grand words of the portfolio holder and the Leader, there is nothing actually in this budget which would indicate this, nor are there any drastic changes to the approach that this Council has taken in previous budget years. I would urge the Leader of the Council to take the opportunity of setting this budget to reassure residents and businesses here in Surrey Heath that his previous remarks were incorrect, and this Council is not, and never has been, in danger of effective bankruptcy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Councillor Kang.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. When this Lib Dem administration started, one of their visions was really for campaigning for residents. And I thank Council, particularly Lisa Fine-Cook and Councillor Rise and other councillors who particularly in Camberley really held Thames Water to account for their mess in bringing sludge to the town centre, Camberley. And this was last year, February. And it is their good work that we've been, where the Thames Water has been held to account, and that there is some likelihood that there's, well, in principle, they've agreed some sort of compensation to compensate, hopefully, for the poor quality of that summer, last summer that you might remember. So thank you. And so this vision for the Lib Dem is very important, that we campaign for residents. Campaigning for Fimley Heath, Fimley sort of Park Hospital to remain is also very important, and we will continually focus on that to ensure that that stays within the borough. Now, there are other sort of elements which, like the footbridge over the M3, that we've worked to campaign for residents, where we've actually reduced the time for this new bridge to be reduced from 24 months to 18 months. And we've also tried to mitigate the sort of loss of facilities by opening the Albert Road playground for the residents there. We've also been open in allowing questions to be put to the council at nearly all committee meetings. The Youth Council has been mentioned already, and then we will be appointing a young mayor in due course. Lastly, we're trying to engage the local residents, and particularly through resident panels, where they can put their points of view so that we are listening to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor
Cook.
Finn Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Last year, I discovered a leak in the roof of my house. In the first instance, and tell me, colleagues, if this sounds familiar to you, I paid a handyman a few quid to go up onto my roof armed with a bucket of cement and a tin of expanding foam to bodge it for me, to buy myself a little bit of time. It soon became apparent that if I didn't want my family to be wetter indoors than out, that I was going to need to replace the roof rather than rely on the budget job. It was uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable in our family budget, in our household budget, for me to have to do so. But I couldn't continue to explain to my son that we didn't have the money to do it and he had to have a waterfall in his bedroom. So we made the uncomfortable decision, we replaced the roof. And I tell you, it really was uncomfortable. It's pushed my Jag back by at least 2 years now. Now I find myself in a situation where I am going to have to buy a new roof. But we are going to have to spend millions of pounds, not tens of thousands of pounds on this roof. In fact, it's not one new roof, it's several. Our budget has allowed for this, despite previous administrations not having allowed for replacement roofs in their previous budgets. It might be uncomfortable, but the Lib Dems are going to do it. And despite having to make this uncomfortable decision and spend an uncomfortable amount of money, we're actually taking less money from reserves in order to do so. We also have a large portfolio of community properties to manage, and I've been both shocked and incredulous that they have not, in fact, been managed. We have properties whose leases have expired over 20 years ago, and we're now trying to get them up to date, and we have many repair and maintenance leases which have not been monitored or enforced, meaning that a number of our assets now require a lot of money to get them back up to standard. It's become clear to me and the Property and Economic Development team that the portfolio has been largely ignored, not just for years, but for decades. It's turned into a huge and ongoing piece of work to even get a handle on what it is that needs doing, let alone schedule the works and agree new heads of terms on those lapsed leases. It would seem that previous administrations have focused solely on purchasing very, very expensive properties rather than managing our portfolio and ensuring that our properties are safe and cared for, which benefited our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Then, Councillor Thompson. Yes. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the budget put before us tonight, I'm sure it's disheartening to everyone in this chamber to see that whilst this administration has already made such impressive inroads into reducing the deficit, we are still not able to forecast a balanced budget at the end of this medium-term financial strategy without the ongoing reliance on drawing down on finite and dwindling reserves. Yes, the financial predicament has been exacerbated by the impact of poor historic investment decisions and the cost of servicing the debt relating to these purchases, but let's not kid ourselves as to the real issue being faced not just by Surrey Heath, but by local authorities up and down the country. A succession of Conservative central governments who are willfully underfunding local government, with 27% real-term drop in financial settlements since they came to power. Couple this with the crippling interest rate rises caused in no small part by the disastrous 44 days of Liz Truss's premiership, and you have the perfect storm. Not only is direct funding reduced and the cost of servicing the debt increased, but the income we are able to generate ourselves is severely hamstrung too. Boris Johnson's much fanfared levelling up strategy, now overseen by Michael Gove, is anything but a race to the bottom, more like, which simply picks the pockets of all local authorities in the South East to redistribute elsewhere. Residents may be surprised to learn that the council tax we receive, only 11% comes to Surrey Heath. And of all the business rates generated by our thriving local economy, we get to keep just 8.3%. So what levers does that leave us with? Council tax rises are capped way below inflation, and besides, in a cost of living crisis, we would be loath to increase further even if they weren't. We can raise the prices of discretionary services, such as parking or planning. But even then, that only really serves to cover their own cost. That only leaves us with the spectre of more cuts further down the line. Our Section 151 officer often says, reserves are there for us to use on a rainy day. Under this Conservative government, it always seems to be monsoon season. We can all but hope that following the general election, that later this year, brighter times might finally be on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Rowlands and Councillor Rakes.
Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I'm a bit puzzled by the new homes bonus and haven't got a really clear impression of what the issue is and how that's being dealt with and where that leaves us, because there are further comments later in the budgetary paper about that. Just to make a comment about the role of the police commissioner, I did actually approach her about an issue and a question and got the response, and that we do give a lot of money to that particular individual, that it wasn't within her purview. It seemed to be a very strangely restricted purview for quite a lot of money we pay for the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we are paying quite a lot of money towards that.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Councillor Rakes.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the great joys of Surrey Heath is the wealth and diversity of the green spaces, both the formal and the informal. I'm pleased that despite the limitations of the budget, the development of the quality of our green spaces is going to continue in line with the strategy to protect the environment. After the boost up to 4 Green Flag Awards last year, well done, I know the Council is looking to extend that number even further. I also note that room has been found in the capital plan for the St Catherine's Lake Road and Lake Road Sang access, and improvements to ensure residents can make the most of this area, which will be a real asset in the future. I was out this morning with the Surrey Heath Health Walkers, which is largely run by volunteers, and I know that once the car parking is sorted out down there, they will be very keen to enjoy that space. This kind of social activity is so important for all aspects of the health of our residents. Of course, other major parks also need appropriate parking, but I think we've heard enough on that already this evening. We've also heard of the new facilities in Councillor Whitcroft's comments earlier, so I won't cover those. But on a smaller scale, I welcome the new facilities for the 3G pitch in Frimley Lodge Park, which will be welcomed by the very many young footballers that get to use it. It's amazing how many hundreds there are out every Saturday around the borough. As will be some improved showers in my own ward, which they'll enjoy. The pitches there are always occupied, weather permitting. The other thing that's good is the completion of the refurbishment at the playground in the old ding, which I believe has now been signed off for safety, and that's to be welcomed. And the installation of the new playground at Albert Road Bagshot, which will start on the 11th of March, and is due to be completed by the end of the month, apparently. So that'll be great. So all in all, it's great to see continuing progress in our green spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Rakes. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't envy the situation of this administration, and I thank our officers for their incredibly hard work in putting together this budget. I'm very concerned about the future of our council's finances going into the future. Now, I note that councillors tonight have discussed various economic issues and various issues that have put pressure on the council's finances. But we learnt in the last week that the economy actually contracted in the last 3 months of 2023, a recession that's been termed Rishi's recession. Now, I'm wondering whether we've considered this latest eventuality and whether this may worsen some of the predictions that have been prepared in this budget. And I'm wondering if this can be addressed when we sum up. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark.
Mayor and councillors, I'm so pleased that despite financial constraints, the budget and MTFS have kept to our net zero and environmental pledges, and we realise that the urgent action is needed for climate change, or due to climate change. The installation of PV solar panels on Places Leisure in Camberley will provide a net benefit by giving clean energy to the leisure centre and also reduce the council's liability to energy costs at the centre. In addition to this, the final strategy sets out a commitment to consider net zero projects on a case-by-case basis. This will hopefully provide the opportunity for more projects to come forward similar to Places Leisure. Even with the financial pressures we are facing, we remain committed to these capital improvements and will also seek external funding where possible to cover the costs of energy-efficient measures. We do need to keep looking at ways to achieve our net zero target, and tackling our Scope 3 emissions, like those of our contractors, Amy, is going to be difficult and will require a real concerted effort over the MTFS period to ensure a level of achievement. Another excellent part of the strategy is to improve biodiversity. This will be done both by developers through planning applications and the implementation of biodiversity net gain targets, and also by improving practices on the land owned by Surrey Heath, such as the Windermere Sang and the many parks. I'm sure that we can all see the benefit of these measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alan Asprey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Rob. On the doorsteps last year, during the election campaign, one of the more common responses I heard was, "I'm fed up with politicians, you're all the same." A response, I guess, that many of us in this chamber got at that time last year. Fed up with stories about corruption, cronyism, and people feeling that the laws of the land did not apply to them. And although most of the stories were from Westminster, by dint of the fact that we were standing for office, meant that people put us all in the same boat. I did my best to convince the sceptics that we were different and that we were and would be responsible. When asked what our priority would be if elected, I referred them to this document. Our vision for Surrey Heath. Secure the council finances was and remains a focus for this administration. And this budget is our first step towards it, towards achieving that goal and ensuring that Surrey Heath does not join the other councils such as Woking, Thurrock, Nottingham and Birmingham. I assured those residents that we would be responsible people and that we would make responsible decisions about how their council tax money is spent. Not necessarily the most popular decisions, sometimes tough decisions, like the ones on car parking that Councillor Whitcroft spoke about earlier, but that we would not shy away from them. This budget provides the right level of funding which will enable us to complete the work on the emerging local plan and bring it forward for inspection in public and subsequent adoption. This local plan supports our strategy of supporting a strong economy and creating more homes. The plan will detail where those new homes will be built and, importantly, how many affordable homes will be available so that people, especially our young people, will be able to fulfil their ambitions of owning their own home without having to move out of the borough. This budget also provides, as alluded to by Councillor Fine and Cook, the right level of funding for the maintenance of our assets.
as she's already said, it's difficult to repair a leaky roof if you've been given no money to do it. I am confident that we can go back to those sceptical residents with this budget and assure them that this administration is taking the responsible view in our desire to secure the council's finances. Responsible people making responsible decisions to deliver for you and a fairer society. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Rather unusually, I wish to propose an amendment to the budget. It's not a change, it's an addition. I can read it now or later, but I reserve my right to speak. As my lovely assistant takes a copy round so that you can all see what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Councillor Bettman.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to second the amendment, and I reserve the right to speak.
Councillors, I will give you a few moments to read this as this document's only just been put on the table. Thank you, councillors. I hope you've had enough time to look at it. Councillor Bettman, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Madam Mayor, councillors, as you know, I've been Chair of Audit and Standards now, with risk added, for nearly 4 years. 3 years in the previous council and approximately 1 in this. In the previous council, I narrowly missed out signing off the 2018-19 accounts audit, the first by BDO, which were then signed by the then chair, who later became leader of the council. Following some mild difficulty on the majority Conservative group. This led to their losing overall control of the council, but more importantly, ushered in a number of significant changes, not least of which was the appointment of members of minority groups to scrutiny chair positions. Concurrent with this, there was also a change in the officer makeup, starting with the Chief Executive and Finance Officer, and which went on to include all senior officers of the Council. In my view, much to the benefit of the Council and the residents. The state of the Council's finances, commented upon vociferously by a number of residents over the years and continuing to their credit, to this day, was mirrored by the then Lib Dem group leader, Sashi Malvagana. The common message was that the council was living off its reserves and that that position was not sustainable. This was reflected in the previous financial resolution of February 2023, which is still what the council is operating from until this current motion is passed. The 2023 motion showed that this council would run out of money in 2026-27. I downloaded the minutes this morning from the council website, and here is the relevant table. This one. It shows a general fund figure in that year of £406,000, standard practice requiring £1 million minimum. And it's accompanied by a note, and I will read you the note, which states, the estimate of balance based on the general fund is based on budget projections. Now, I know that some members object to translations of legalese into English, but I will translate that statement for you, in case you don't get it. This is a guess built on guesses. Guesses that could not take account the full effect of trustonomics. Increases in base rate in interest rates from 2.25% when the review process started in September 22 to 5.25% in August 2023, and where it's still at rests. Inflation rising, increasing prices of energy and wages, and even though inflation is going down, thank heavens, the cost increases are not. And we are now, as has been mentioned, in recession, which will affect income. It is to be hoped that it's not a double D recession. The mess the government has wrought with their scrapping of the Audit Commission has been spoken of in this chamber on many occasions. The Section 151 officer and I both had full heads of hair at the start of this process. And look at us now. It is the government's mess, and while they have put forward proposals to clear it up, deadlines are still being missed, with no impact at all on the delivery of our 2019-20 accounts audit. My concern, as Chair of Audit and Standards and Risk, is that without the proposed amendment, there is still a likelihood that not all of our outstanding audits will be completed soon, as our current auditor is no longer going to be participating in the government scheme, and who can blame them? What incentive will there be for them to get finished in a few months the two audits that will still be outstanding, even if they complete the audit for 2019-20 by the end of March? And we've had such promises on many occasions over the past 4 years. What of 2021? What of 21-22? Do we just hope? Or do we allow for the possibility of some external scrutiny of our own accounts over the Council's finances for those intermediate years? Do we have confidence in that those two audits will be completed in a matter of months by an organisation and system that has taken over 4 years to not yet complete just one? If we do not include the ability to get a firm and stable foundation and an understanding of the financial situation based on facts rather than guesses, there can be no confidence in the financial process going forward. My company, I always like to make these things personal, performs safety and risk assessments, and we are a world leader in this process, having worked to persuade governments that our way is better and led to laws being changed. For example, animal testing on cosmetics is now illegal in the majority of countries in the world. The process started in the UK in 1995. But make no mistake, safety assessments are in the field of guesses. Educated, informed guesses, but guesses nonetheless. It's the nature of biology, and we must allow for variability. But accounting is not a profession renowned for guesswork. It's about exactness and getting things correct. If we allow the guess scenario to continue, we will never be absolutely sure of where we are with regards to the financial status of the council. This amendment will enable the council, via the performance and finance, to establish a firm foundation for the future, enable a proper examination of the accounts by an external scrutineer to fill the gap left by whatever situation is in relation for the 23-24 accounts. The new auditors will be taking responsibility for those, but between the finish of BDO and the start of Grant Thornton, it'll be very, very quick. Enable the council to amend the financial position based on facts rather than guesswork, no matter how educated and informed the guesses may be. I commend this amendment that is before you to the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor
Thank you, Mayor. Without labouring the previous points about the inherited position, I second the proposal to amend the recommendation as presented. Public sector accounting is a totally different animal to private sector accounting. And in my day job as a chartered accountant in practice, I'm very familiar with that private sector code. I appreciate that accounting standards are not generally understood outside of my profession, so I'd like to present an analogy to help my fellow members understand the impact of this amendment. I'm often presented with a shoebox or carrier bag full of receipts by clients for their year-end accounts. These are not books and records. The books and records have to be prepared from those receipts. And in most cases, I'm not presented with all the information I need, and I have to find the answers by asking questions, requesting further information, or making and agreeing an acceptable assumption given the various regulations and ethical practices of my profession. This was and is the situation for our finance team and auditors, albeit on a far more complex scale than a shoebox and with much larger figures at stake. Financial reports cover a period of time from A to B, and it's essential that the starting point is known. Where it isn't known, the end point, by definition, cannot be determined with certainty. Preparing financials without certainty over that starting point is like mapping a sand dune. Impossible to do with any degree of certainty, as it's constantly shifting and changing shape in the wind. Our officers inherited that proverbial bag full of receipts, and many, many hours of hard work have been put into bringing this budget into its current form. However, we still have sand dunes in the lack of the finalised accounts for 2019-20 onwards, the Jersey Property Trust, the property asset valuation changes, and the minimum revenue provision. All of these uncertainties can have a significant influence on the medium-term financials presented this evening, and the impact of these uncertainties is still not quantifiable. This amendment allows the Council and its officers to continue its efforts to obtain the clarifications and to attend to and quantify the remaining uncertainties arising from those areas highlighted, and I urge you to vote to accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. Would anybody like to speak on the amendment? No, it's Dr. No, it's the gentleman over there.
It could be Councillor Cope, I think, was first.
Okay. We told Councillor Cope was first.
Thank you. I find it quite disappointing that a Liberal Democrat group will bring a budget to this council and then propose an amendment that only they have seen and none of us have been able to scrutinise and analyse alongside the budget. I don't know what I think about this, and I wonder whether it would be possible, whether we could get the views of the Section 151 officer on whether what's being asked for here is sensible or indeed possible, because at the moment I'm quite at a loss as to how to vote on this because I just don't have enough information.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Councillor 151 officer, Mr. Watson.
Just on a point of order, can I just confirm with the monitoring officer with regards to the Constitution that it's appropriate for an officer to speak at full council during the budget debate?
Thank you, Councillor Rise. We'll
I don't think my name's coming up, so I'll be Bob Watson on the screen just for a moment. But thank you, Mayor. And my view is that provided the Mayor is comfortable with permitting Mr Watson to speak, then it's a decision for the Mayor.
You heard Mr Rathmore's response, and I will allow Mr Watson to speak.
On a further point of order, the question that I asked was whether it was in the Constitution that I don't believe the Constitution actually says whether the Mayor approves. I don't believe the Constitution states. I think the Constitution states that an officer can't speak at the budget debate.
Thank you, Councillor Rise, for the question. And Madam Mayor, if you allow me to answer the question.
Yes, I'm happy for the 151 officer to speak.
Okay, I just wanted to very quickly add that for the Mayor to permit an officer to speak, it comes under the general powers of management for the Mayor as she presides over the meeting. Okay.
Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Cope, for your question, which I understand is just really asking for some clarification around the motion that's been put forward today. I have been cited on this, so I have actually been involved in part of the drafting around this as well. So it's not that I'm uncited on it, but I appreciate that you as councillors possibly are. If we take the first two bullet points, I think it's a statement of fact. I share Councillor Betton's disappointment that we have not been able to produce our 1920 audited accounts, and I've made no secret of that. And I also would wish to have the other accounts published as soon as I can, and my team are working very hard and very diligently to try and produce those accounts. It is a case that you have to do them in a series of order, so you do one and then another and then another and so on like that. What we will probably have, following the government's consultation around the accounts issues and backstop, is that we don't have to wait for them to be audited to start the next set and publish the next set. So the intention will be that there'll be draft accounts coming along a bit like buses. You'll wait for years and then three will come along at once or within very short succession. So you move on to the other bullet points. I think the resource challenges that the finance service were under, and I have had a very successful recruitment campaign, and I'm very pleased about that, were detailed in the review that was considered at the end of last year. And again, I can't really speak for BDO, but the issue around resource challenges within the external audit team is a national issue for all the audit firms. So whereas we are currently with BDO, I know the other audit firms are in a similar position, and it is a national, I think it's something like just under 900 sets of accounts outstanding, not all down to me and my finance team. In terms of the recommendations, yes, the portfolio holder and myself will report back to the executive on the progress made around these accounts, and we have a statutory requirement to meet the government's backstop date that they've currently, I know it says backstop date in here, that was put in at my request because the current consultation is suggesting 30th September 2024 for all accounts up to 2023. That is what we are working to, but I wouldn't want to say that as a date because the consultation is still ongoing.
Thank you, Mr Watson. Councillor Marley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'd like to get to Councillor Betton's description of the guesses on the guesses and how badly things were run, which brings me on to my pet peeve, which is the House of Fraser. Back in 2015, the previous administration decided, and were encouraged to by the Conservative government, to pursue an aggressive purchase of real estate properties. We fully understand why. They were 5 years into austerity, the budgets had already been slashed, and they were faced with dwindling income and rising costs. They needed a new revenue stream, and with the full support and backing of our local MP, Michael Gove, they started out on a frivolous and scandal-ridden spend of taxpayers' money. What happened next was a lesson in the abuse of power and how not to purchase commercial property. No business plan, no proper risk analysis, little thought, no proper due diligence, and most importantly, no regeneration plan for the near £100 million investment they had just made on behalf of the residents and businesses of Surrey Heath. The House of Fraser in particular is a disgraceful misuse of power by the previous administration. By invoking urgent action, which was created for disaster situations and not to ram through the purchase of a broken down 35-year-old building that's riddled with asbestos. The removal of asbestos will cost us all £3.5 million. And after that, the building is still not fit for use. Where was the due diligence in that purchase? To date, the vacant House of Fraser has cost the residents and businesses of Surrey Heath nearly £1 million, with a yearly cost of £133,000 in rates, insurance and maintenance. And that figure does not include the repayment loan. That's taxpayers' money. How many car parks could that have upgraded? How many other services could that have supported? Suffice to say, the road to full recovery will be counted in the millions and not in the thousand. All in all, another failed Conservative experiment that they expect everyone else to pay for and for us to move on. Maybe Mr. Gove would like to offer his apologies to the people of Surrey Heath for yet another disaster he supported and indeed had a hand in creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marley. Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we're showing disappointment, we've just heard that this amendment is not last minute, as our own Section 151 officer had sight and worked on it. That is not transparent, and you are not being transparent. This is the second failure of trust. First, we had the petition that your group kiboshed with over 1,600 signatures. Councillor Ashbury, perhaps you want to recirculate that orange book of promises that you have in the chamber with you.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Councillor Garrett.
I really should start speaking before you two. My list is getting shorter. So, honesty is the best policy. Quite disappointed that this wasn't shown to us in advance. Obviously, Mr. Watson had seen it, and my first note was get the 151 officer's thoughts. If he was able to see it, and it was that important, and this budget is as good as you say it was, why did we not see the papers in advance? Was it just so we could just get thrown in the last minute so we can't make an easy decision? And actually, that's probably the reason why it was there. I heard, I think, Councillor Betton mention external services, and I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard, but I'm happy to be corrected. If there is external services involved in this, and maybe that reports back to the external support in the motion, does that mean there's going to be a cost involved in this? Because if we've got an external support, that leads me to believe that we're going to need to be funding that support. So it would be handy if we know what that external support cost is, because obviously that needs to be put into the budget as well. As I say, it's not helpful to get the motion at the last minute, and I would have liked more time. And finally, I think it was mentioned that this would come to P&F. So as chair of P&F, it would have been quite helpful for me to see it in advance as well, to know about it, to give my thoughts on that side. So I think, honesty being the best policy, I'm quite disappointed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this amendment. The previous administration left behind 4 years of unaudited accounts. The Council's finances were so complicated due to reckless property investments, vast borrowing, and even a Channel Islands trust to be unpicked. There is now little prospect of all of the past accounts ever being successfully audited. Only a few councils in England have a backlog this bad, including Woking Borough Council, which, of course, went bust. This means that there cannot be confidence in the level of reserves, a very unfortunate and potentially risky position to be in. There could be further horror stories in the accounts waiting to be uncovered, and this amendment seeks to find them. The last administration also left behind inadequate minimum revenue provision, MRP, towards eventually paying off the massive debt they incurred. This error has been uncovered, and the hole in the Council's finances will have to be plugged in years to come. Future generations of Surrey Heath residents will live their entire lives under the shadow of the debt built up by the previous administration. The debt has become more and more expensive to service. Like an interest-only mortgage, the Council has not put aside enough to pay it off at the end of its term. This is a position that many people have found themselves in the UK recently. 18 months ago, Liz Truss became Prime Minister and immediately crashed the economy. She was elected by a majority of Conservative Party members, which is why they're no longer trusted to vote for their own leader. This sent inflation and interest rates soaring, leading to financial devastation for many people. The economic environment that has worsened the Council's financial problems did not come about by itself. It was a choice, not by the electorate, but a small group of ideologically motivated people. If we are looking for a group to blame for the economic ruin which has exposed the previous administration's recklessness and mismanagement, maybe we should blame the Tory party members who voted for Liz Truss, the UK's most destructive Prime Minister ever, who couldn't even outlast a lettuce. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? No. Councillor McIntyre, would you like to, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
No, it's not.
Thank you. Yes, I would, Mayor. Thank you for raising the amendment. I agree. I think it speaks to what we need to achieve, and thank Mr. Watson for his support in it. Just for complete clarity, it's my fault that it didn't come to anyone any earlier. There was nothing else for anyone else, so please, Councillor Garrett, you can blame me for that. That's all I have to say.
We will now put the amendment to the vote. It will be a recorded vote. So, who's calling out the names? The monitoring officer is to call out the names, and the votes will be recorded accordingly.
For, against,
And you'll be asked to vote either for or against the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors. For this recorded vote, when you hear your name called, I'd be grateful if you could...
Point of order. Could you just clarify whether this is for the amendment or the main budget? Because it's for the amendment. Do we need to have a named vote?
I did say the amendment. Councillor
Does it need to be a named vote?
Yes, it needs to be a recorded vote for the amendment.
It's the recorded vote for the amendment.
Okay. So, councillors, when you hear your name called, I'll be grateful if you could say for, against or abstained. So, Councillor Alan Ashbury.
For.
Councillor Louise Ashbury.
For.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
For.
Councillor Johnny Cope.
Abstain.
Councillor Kel Farnan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Lisa Farnan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Mary Glowett.
For.
Councillor Mark Gordon. Councillor Julie Hode.
For.
Councillor Nirmal Kang.
For.
Councillor Sabi Kang.
For.
Councillor Rob Lee.
For.
Councillor Sean MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Leanne McIntyre.
For.
Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
Abstain.
Councillor Lewis Mears.
Abstain.
Councillor Liz Noble.
For.
Councillor Jack Olmo.
For.
Councillor David O'Mahony.
For.
Councillor Ying Perrick.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Quinn.
For.
Councillor Bob Rakes.
For.
Councillor Murray Rowlands. Councillor Morgan Rise.
For.
Councillor John Skipper.
For.
Councillor Pat Tedder.
Abstain.
Councillor Josh Thorne.
Abstain.
Councillor Kevin Thompson.
For.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Abstain.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
For.
Councillor Valerie White.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Wilson.
For.
Thank you, members. The votes have been counted and it's 24 in favour, none against and 9 abstentions. So the motion is carried. Sorry about this, members. Right, the amendment now becomes part of the original motion and we can have further debate or we can vote on the motion. You want a choice? Councillor McIntyre?
Can I have the right to reply?
Yes.
Speaking last.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you everyone for your lively discussion. It was interesting to hear. Whilst the perception, I appreciate it, Councillor Clope, is that nothing has changed. As I pointed out, the options are limited when it comes to raising income. So, you know, even in the event that there was a huge amount more to raise, it would be unappealing with the cost of living crisis. What we do need to do is find further ways to reduce council expenditure and make sort of transformational changes so that they're lasting for the future. But we have also done two other things. So we've cleaned up the figures to ensure that what is in there is thought through and using all the information that we have today in order to minimise any surprises in the future and to ensure that what we have put in is deliverable. We've also challenged the efficiencies, so the service leads and the portfolio holders have done a huge amount of work going line by line to see what can be reduced and where cuts can be made without affecting the major services. The new homes bonus, that is based on a 0.4% baseline of new homes for either new builds or where conversions are made or long-term empty homes are reused. Last year, we only managed to achieve 0.34%. So as an effect, we're only paid out at that lower amount. So obviously, going forward, we need to be building more. It is also likely in the sensitivity analysis you'll see that new homes bonus is likely to be phased out. In terms of recession, it's a really good point. Last week, obviously, the recession was announced. And our numbers, we believe, are prudent. But the retail risk that I talked about becomes an even bigger risk now that we are officially in recession. And clearly that is something we're going to be keeping an eye on in terms of both our income, but also ensuring that our residents are supported during that time, and obviously signposting people to support on council tax bills where they require that. So overall, again, thank you. It has been a hard, and someone mentioned blood, sweat and tears earlier. I'm not sure which side that was on, but there was a lot on all sides. But I am really proud of the budget. I do believe it's setting us up for the future. And I do believe that there is a lot more that we are going to have to do to put us back in a sustainable place. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Now we will vote on the budget. It's a recorded vote, so your name will be called and you will say for, against or abstain. Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. And once again, councillors, when your name is called, if you could confirm for, against or abstained. So, Councillor Alan Ashbury.
For.
Councillor Louise Ashbury.
For.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
For.
Councillor Johnny Cope.
For.
Councillor Kel Finan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Lisa Finan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
For.
Councillor Mary Glowett.
For.
Councillor Mark Gordon.
For.
Councillor Julie Hode.
For.
Councillor Nirmal Kang.
For.
Councillor Sabi Kang.
For.
Councillor Rob Lee.
For.
Councillor Sean MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Leanne McIntyre.
For.
Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
For.
Councillor Lewis Mears.
For.
Councillor Liz Noble.
For.
Councillor Jack Olmo.
For.
Councillor David O'Mahony.
For.
Councillor Ying Perrott.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Quinn.
For.
Councillor Bob Rakes.
For.
Councillor Murray Rowlands.
For.
Councillor Morgan Rice.
For.
Councillor John Skipper.
For.
Councillor Pat Tedder.
For.
Councillor Josh Thorne.
For.
Councillor Kevin Thompson.
For.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
For.
Councillor Valerie White.
For.
Councillor Richard Wilson.
For.
Okay. Unanimous.
The motion was carried unanimous. Moving on to agenda item 9. I'd like to invite Councillor Leanne McIntyre to introduce the report on the setting of council tax for 24-25 and then move a proposal. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mayor. I propose the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Do you have a seconder?
Motion.
Thank you,
I'd like to
Councillor
second the motion, please, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Members, this is a technical report, and unless members have any questions with regard to the figures, it is proposed to move straight to a vote.
It's based on the paper that's been in the supplement.
So I was a bit missing. This council tax is based on the paper that is on the table in front of you. In accordance with the regulations, it will be necessary to record the names of members who vote for the decision for or against the decision and those who abstain from voting. Mr Ransmore will call out your name and you are asked to indicate whether you are voting in favour or against the proposal or abstaining from voting.
Thank you, Mayor. And once again, councillors, when your name is called, if you could confirm for, against or abstained. Councillor Alan Ashbury. For. Councillor Louise Ashbury.
For.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
For.
Councillor Johnny Cope.
For.
Councillor Kel Finan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Lisa Finan-Cook.
For.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
For.
Councillor Mary Glowett.
For.
Councillor Mark Gordon.
For.
Councillor Julie Hode.
For.
Councillor Nirmal Kang.
For.
Councillor Sabi Kang.
For.
Councillor Rob Lee.
For.
Councillor Sean MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Leanne McIntyre.
For.
Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
For.
Councillor Lewis Mears.
For.
Councillor Liz Noble.
For.
Councillor Jack Olmo.
For.
Councillor David O'Mahony.
For.
Councillor Ying Perrott.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Quinn.
For.
Councillor Bob Rakes.
For.
Councillor Murray Rowlands.
For.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
For.
Councillor John Skipper.
For.
Councillor Pat Tedder.
For.
Councillor Josh Thorne.
For.
Councillor Kevin Thompson.
For.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
For.
Councillor Valerie White.
For.
And Councillor Richard Wilson.
For.
Thank you, members. The motion was carried unanimous. Agenda item 10 is to receive and consider an e-petition concerning Wellington Park TPO. The lead petitioner will be given 5 minutes to present the petition and then members will be asked to debate the petition. The council will then decide to respond to the petition. I'd like to ask Councillor Johnny Cope to speak on the petition. I will advise when 1 minute of your time remains. Sorry, did you hear that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. People deserve to feel safe in their homes and in their surrounding neighbourhood. They should feel that their children can play outside without fear of injury, and they should not be continually worried about damage being caused to their property through something over which they have no control. I think that is something everyone in this chamber should be able to agree on. But unfortunately, it is not the reality for people who live within some areas of the Wellington Park estate in St Paul's Ward. To give you some background on this petition, during last year's election and in the months since being elected, I was contacted by a number of residents in relation to maintenance of trees on council-owned land, either by Surrey Heath Council or Surrey County Council. I held a public meeting with residents late last summer with members of the Green Spaces team and Glendale. Around 80 residents attended to express their frustration at the maintenance of trees on their estate. This petition followed on from that, and although I started it, local residents drove its progress, going door to door, securing the signatures that have brought it to full council, the first petition that has come to full council under the new rules. Wherever either I or the residents turn to improve the situation in the trees in Wellington Park, we inevitably hit the same obstacle. Tree Preservation Order 1186, and in particular, the two woodland compartments W1 and W2. This TPO was put in place in 1986. It's older than me. It's old enough to be Councillor Mears' dad. This was at the time when planning was granted for the initial development of this estate, and as far as I can tell, it's never been reviewed. Whenever we have sought for works to be done in woodland areas, either through the County Council or the Borough Council, we are constantly told that it is not possible due to the protections afforded to these trees. I appreciate that not everyone will have great levels of knowledge of TPOs, and I don't have time for a full explainer. Woodland TPOs are for woodlands. The clue is in the name. Anyone who's been to Wellington Park can see that it is not a woodland. These TPOs are not appropriate for residential estates where trees require greater management for people to live safely and happily in their neighbourhoods. Our request is that a change is made to this TPO to make it an area TPO, which is effectively a downgrade, and to allow time for a proper survey so that protection is given to those trees that are worthy of it. I just want to turn to the report that I thank the Chief Executive for preparing. I note that it states that the order does not preclude effective management of trees in the area. I have to say that this is not my experience. It is not the experience of residents who live on the estate, either when it comes to applying for permission to carry out works to their own trees or in effective management of borough or county-owned trees. I have visited sites where trees are growing at almost right angles across people's gardens. I've seen trees where roots are pushing up against external structures, potentially causing damage. One resident contacted me shortly after I was elected to report concerns around a council-owned tree near his home. He had noted that there were two trunks rubbing against each other and was concerned that that might cause a fall. When reported, the message was that this tree was safe and works could not be carried out due to the protections under the Woodland TPO. A few months later, a large branch fell from this tree onto his property. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and the only substantive damage was to a small fence, which was quickly repaired by the Green Spaces team. Another branch fall occurred in Wellington Park just 2 weeks ago near an open field where children regularly play. Fortunately, again, no one was injured or significant damage done, but these incidents are occurring regularly, and there is a growing feeling among residents on the estate accident waiting to happen. Paragraph 4 of this report states that TPO cannot be changed to an area TPO because government guidance only allows these in emergencies.
1 minute, Councillor Cope.
Thank you. However, it is also stated that it is good practice that older TPOs are reviewed, but this is difficult due to resource implications. This leaves residents in Wellington Park in a position where the council follows the guidance to not use an area TPO, but doesn't follow the best practice to review the TPO. That doesn't seem right to me. I'd also note that much of the surrounding area of St Paul's is covered in area TPOs, many of which are older than this one. I would strongly argue that the very least residents of Wellington Park deserve is not to be caught in an anomaly due to a bizarre decision made in 1986 to impose a woodland TPO on them. Finally, I note the recommendation that a task and finish group be set up. I would implore that this is not used to kick the can down the road. Residents need to see their council taking action on this, and I would argue that even if it does mean spending a little bit of money to get a survey done. I'm conscious I'm running low on time, but I hope I've given some context as to why this issue has come forward today and why it is such an important issue for residents who live on the Wellington Park estate. I hope that members of the council will show their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. You will also note that the briefing note from the Chief Exec has been included in the agenda to help guide you with your deliberations. The briefing note also refers to Section 6 to the action the Council can take. I would now like to invite members to discuss the petition and the requested action and to make any comments and move a recommendation.
Councillor Betton.
Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an issue that is not new, and I do believe that... Oh! Thank you. I'm fully supportive of the position. I moved into my house in 1984. We used to be a meadow. We now have trees poking their branches through our windows. Walls are going up because of the roots, and so on. I remember Graham Tapper, Councillor Tapper, from the last council, this was a big issue for him. I have complained to the TPO officer on the council about the trees and been told nothing can be done because it's area-wide application. I support review. I think we should remember that Surrey Heath is one of the most highly treed boroughs in the world, in the country, and people live here as well. Trees should not take precedence over people. We should live in harmony. We should support trees where it is right to do so, but we should also support people enjoying their gardens without fear. I support Councillor Cope's petition.
Councillor Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to echo what's been said in the chamber already by both Councillor Cope and Councillor Betton. Obviously, having spoken to residents across Wellington Park, the frustration and the annoyance is clear to see. A lot of the doors we spoke to, well, the majority of the people we spoke to at the doors in the areas where the Woodland TPO are, and even outside of the Woodland TPO areas within Wellington Park, expressed the concern about safety, also whether that be in the parks, but also to their own properties. There was one resident who was talking about how there's this tree which is virtually on top of their garage, which is allowing rodents to get into their garage, destroy property, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it until look at this and potentially, hopefully, support this petition going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to caution. I fully appreciate the concerns of the residents and acknowledge that in some cases they've got very valid concerns. However, we do need to be very cautious that we don't impact the very special character areas that we have throughout the borough. So much as I feel it's something that needs to be reviewed, I think we need to be very mindful of this council's objectives in terms of biodiversity and biodiversity net gain, and also that there are occasions when the ongoing impact in terms of the fact that there are occasions when potentially less scrupulous individuals will use a reduction in this in order to bring about a change in policy that would not be beneficial overall for the residents within this council. So much as I support the majority of the stuff that is here and the recommendations that are here, I would just like to ensure that caution is applied, and much as residents are important, so are our trees and our environment, because without them, to be fair, we probably wouldn't have our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
Councillor Wilson, Councillor White.
Councillor White first or Councillor Wilson?
I couldn't tell. So you choose.
Councillor White.
I'd just like to say that I do support this because I moved into a house 37 years ago with 14 trees in the garden with TPOs on them. I accept the fact that the trees were there first and the houses were put in afterwards. Over the last 37 years, I now have only 6 trees in the garden because the others have either had storm damage and blown over. Fortunately, they've not blown onto my house. They've blown onto my neighbour's house, which I'm in fear of that. Every time we have a storm, I can see the trees leaning over. While I accept the TPOs, the trees in my garden and the surrounding area, I do feel that something should be done because, as someone said, we do live here and I do love the trees, but there is a limit.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendations on the supplementary agenda pack and say a few words on them now, if that's okay.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Wilson?
I'm happy to second.
No, so you've got to speak.
Councillor Wilson has to speak now.
Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cope, for using the new petition system. It's very gratifying to see it being used so early on. So on the unsuitability of historical TPOs, there's an area TPO that covers a large part of my ward, and an elderly couple who live there have 5 tall trees in their garden and have them regularly maintained every few years. Recently, a neighbour complained that a branch had grown and was now nearly touching the wall of their house. So the couple printed out, filled in and submitted the form by post to the council to request permission to have the trees cut back to their size 3 years before. In the same way they had done for decades. However, procedures have changed and their request was deemed invalid. So they drove to Camberley and visited the council offices in person to try to sort it out. They just wanted to be compliant, to follow the proper procedure and look after their trees responsibly. Visiting the council offices in person did not yield any progress. In deep frustration, they knocked on my door one day to see if I could help. So I contacted officers on their behalf, and together we found a way for the permission to be granted eventually. This satisfied their tree surgeon and the work was carried out. The area TPO was simply an inconvenience for responsible residents, consuming their time and officer time and making the proper maintenance of trees more difficult. The TPO was applied in 1976, before most of the estate was built. There are 40-year-old trees in the area which did not exist when the TPO was created, and there are no doubt many trees which existed in 1976 which have disappeared since then. There are certainly many trees in the area that should be protected, but there are also many which should not. That is why I wish to propose this motion, and I am hopeful that a viable solution can be found. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Does he want to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. We all love trees in Surrey Heath. That's why we have so many of them, compared with other boroughs. However, as requested in the petition, it may be time to look at these area TPOs across the whole borough to ascertain whether or not they are still fulfilling the purpose for which they were designed, particularly as many were put in place over 50 years ago. I would like to protect the mature trees that we have in the borough, but we do need to have an up-to-date view of how to protect both the trees and the public. For that reason, I am happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury.
Any other speakers?
Councillor Quinn?
Yeah, only a quick point to make. Clearly, some of the discussion tonight, obviously we've tried to word the motion and the petition in a very polite way, but some of the issues with the trees discussed, I want to know whether our officers and our tree officers in particular are giving correct advice regarding TPOs, the correct advice and information regarding when you can cut branches off or take down dangerous trees. And I'm wondering if that can be part of this task and finish group, whether that can be looked at.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Any other speakers?
I'd actually like to support Councillor Quinn's amendment to this, and maybe we add in a point. I'm going to try really quickly to get appropriate wording that as part of this review, we review the protocol and the guidance given by our arboricultural officer or officers that from who we purchase that advice if we don't, for example, currently have one. And so that the information that is given to residents follows clear, documented guidance in relation to the special character areas and whatever decision is made in relation to TPOs, or words to that effect. I'm sure one of the officers can help me word it slightly more succinctly, but actually it is really important. From what I've heard this evening, most of the issues have resolved from residents contacting us as a council and being given advice on something they can or can't do, which has then had an impact on their own residential amenity.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Any other speakers?
You can ask the mover of the motion whether he'd like to accept that amendment.
Oh, really?
That's Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Wilson, I've been just informed that to ask, do you accept that amendment to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I accept the amendment.
Thank you.
If he hasn't spoken, which he hasn't done.
Councillor Cope?
Thank you. Thanks. I'm very happy with that amendment as well. The other point I would just add that it's not just the advice being given to residents. In my experience, it's also the advice being given to the council's own green spaces team about what they can and cannot do. I've found that sometimes that advice is not clear. So when we're looking at whoever the next tree officer is and the tree officer services that we are currently getting, we also need to be thinking about the advice being given internally as well as to residents.
Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I welcome the work that Councillor Cope has done on this area on behalf of his residents, as we've spoken offline around as well. I too am like Councillor White, have had some experiences with trees that I don't want to remember, having vacated a house at the age of 17 in the middle of the night with my widowed mother, as lime trees had taken out the garage and lime trees were heading for the house. So yes, these things very much need to be managed. What I'm a little bit confused about is exactly what the content of this amendment that we potentially agree to is. So could we get a form of words, please, that we can have back from the officers so it's very clear what we're agreeing to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. You want to reply? Chief Exec?
Thank you, Mayor. Based on what I've heard, I think that looks like, in terms of the document, petition you have in front of you, a new item 10, and that item 10 saying to review the guidance relied on by the council's professional officers, particularly the tree officer.
And document the process. So document the process through which guidance is reviewed and given.
That can be included, but the guidance that the professional staff rely on will be documented. So by itself, that is a document. Try again.
Can you come back? Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, I just want to get I think it is important, and thank you, Councillor MacDonald, for the request for the clarity around the question. So it is to review the guidance, and the process for the guidance that constitutes the advice that is given by, I'm going to call it our Arboricultural Service, rather than naming an actual individual, in relation to the various special character areas, because it does seem to me that seems to have been where most of these problems have actually stemmed from. I'm slightly worried that we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but I think that's probably the primary.
Councillor Rice.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, we now have had 3 versions of an amendment said to us. Obviously, Councillor Wheeler presented it first. There was clarity from the Chief Executive, and now there seems to be a now further amendment. Can we please have a clear text of amendment from the Chief Executive, which should then be put to Councillor Wilson for acceptance? If not, there needs to be a seconder and a vote as per the standing orders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mayor. I will try and assist. So a new item 10, to review the guidance relied on by the Council's professional officers and processes for the guidance that constitutes advice given in relation to special character areas.
It's right. Councillor Quinn wants to come back. Councillor Quinn.
Sorry, just a point of order. Can I clarify what a special character area is, and whether that will include any areas covered by TPOs, which I believe is the main subject of this motion.
Mayor, if I could assist, we could certainly just add in a reference to including special character areas, and then it would cover everything, and not just special character areas. But again, I think we would need the original proposer to accept that amendment.
On a point of order, I'm really sorry to belabor this point, but we now have a fourth version of an amendment. We need... I understand that there are passions that many members have with regards to their areas and with regards to what an outcome of this petition would be. I think we need a clear statement of what the amendment is, and then we need to move to a vote, rather than having a continued back and forth between Councillor Wheeler, between officers, between myself, between all members of this chamber. We need a clear amendment, and then to proceed as the Constitution sets out. I fear that we are now straying from the standing orders and the procedure that is set out in the Constitution of who can speak, etc., etc. So I would ask to have clarity now and move forward. Thank you.
If I can just say, so I'm happy with the last amendment that's been read out by the Chief Executive.
Point of order.
The point of order is that
Madam Mayor.
Is that the original person is then asked. If not, then it goes to the vote.
Please, we'll have order in the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, do you want to accept the amendment?
Councillor Wilson, do you want to accept the amendment, and would you like it read out again?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would like Councillor Quinn's amendment read out as in a final version before I accept or reject. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So this would be an additional item 10 to review the guidance relied on by the Council's professional officers and processes for the guidance that constitutes advice given in relation to and including special character areas. Thank you.
I don't think that goes far enough. Councillor Wilson, do you accept that?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I accept the amendment.
Thank you. Put it to the vote. So I'd like to put this to a vote. Do you want a recorded vote?
No, you can just
a show of hands, please. Those in favour of...
The motion is carried. It's carried.
It's carried? Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'll ask for it. I've been informed that the motion has been carried. Right. Agenda item 11 is the...
My apologies, Madam Mayor. I believe we started off that last vote as a vote on the amendment, and then...
No, as accepted by the...
Sorry, just to confirm.
Councillor Wilson was asked if he accepted the amendment, and he said yes, and on advice of the Chief Executive and Mr Ranthmole, I put it to the... Excuse me, sorry. I put it to the vote and the vote was unanimous.
Madam Mayor, point of order. I have my hand up to speak. Was I not allowed to speak before the vote? Could you clarify that, please?
I don't think you saw his hand up.
I did. If I missed your hand, Councillor Lee, I do apologise.
Am I allowed
It wasn't noted by...
So, am I not allowed to speak because we've taken a vote now? So, presumably I need to speak before we take a
No,
vote.
unfortunately, we've taken a vote.
So, I've been denied my right to speak. Thank you.
I understand that information as given to me by the Chief Executive. I apologise.
Agenda item 11.
Agenda item
Can
11.
I have my dissent recorded of being denied my right to speak, please, in the minutes? Thank you.
Apparently not.
I'm sorry, why not?
Agenda item 11 is the Independent Remuneration Panel's report on the Members' Allowance Scheme. The report and the recommendation of the IRP are before you. I propose that the recommendation of the IRP as set out in the agenda report as amended be approved. Do I?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I would like to second that. Yes, I would like to second that.
Thank you. I would now like to invite members to discuss the proposal and make any comments.
Councillor Garrett.
Councillor Garrett.
I'm going to use that wonderful phrase, point of order. Can I just clarify what we're voting on? Sorry, talking about. So are we now talking about the proposed amendment to recommendation as in the attached papers? Just the normal the paper, we haven't got as far as that. That's fine, thank you.
MacDonald. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this one is documented in front of people, so perhaps that will help with clarifying matters. I'd like to propose the small amendment relating to the payments to the smaller group leaders, and I think it's fairly clear, so I won't say any more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Garrett.
Madam Mayor, this is the beauty of having an amendment of a motion in advance. I'm happy to second this wonderful amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now ask them to discuss it, yeah? Members, I now invite you to discuss the amendment. You should only be discussing the element of the amendment Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Garrett have moved. Anybody wish to speak? Okay. Thank you, members. So we will go... Councillor Garrett.
We can't go through an item without someone saying something. I would just like to say, reference this amendment. It was a discussion between myself and the leader and the other group leaders. We thought this, based on the recommendations from the independent panel, this was a good compromise, if we want to use that word, because otherwise the smaller groups would not have been getting anything, or the group leaders wouldn't get anything. So I just want to say it was a discussion amongst us, and that was we all agreed, I think, based on the recommendations we had. So I'd just like to thank the conversation with the relevant group leaders for that.
So we're now voting on the amendment. Yes. Any other hands? No. Thank you, members. We are now going to vote on the amendment. I've just been told. Please indicate by a show of hands whether you support. So those in favour of the amendment.
It's carried.
So that's carried. Any further comments? Are there any further comments, members? Thank you. Yeah. So thank you, members. I'd like to now move to the vote on the recommendations, including the amendment, by a show of hands. All those in favour? That's unanimous, I think. That's unanimous. Thank you. So that's agreed, members. Item agenda 12, I'd like to invite the leader to introduce the new council strategy for 2024 to 2028. Councillor MacDonald, would you like to introduce the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I think you'll find I spoke about this extensively earlier, so I don't feel the need to say anything further about the council strategy, apart from to recommend it to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if he's not going to speak on it. Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second.
Thank you, Councillor Rise.
Does Councillor Rise want to speak?
Do you wish to speak? No. Do any members have any comments? Councillor Rowlands.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I noticed in the chart on page 165, there's no mention of this council having any cultural or artistic life or support for it. So I was going to suggest another amendment to that diagram that you'll find there to say support for the cultural and artistic life of the borough.
Does anybody want to speak on it, or has he got to accept it?
Yeah, he's got to decide whether he wants to accept it.
There's Councillor MacDonald, isn't it? Councillor MacDonald, do you accept that amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't accept the amendment.
You don't. Councillor Rowlands. Councillor Rowlands, do you have a seconder for your amendment? No?
Any other comments?
Then...
Any other comments?
Any other comments? Councillor MacDonald?
Thank you. Whilst I didn't want to accept the amendment, I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Rowlands is intending in his comments. And you will see in the annual plan a number of statements around looking at the heritage and cultural aspects of the borough's life, which my colleague Councillor Skipper will be leading. I'm sure you'll be engaged with him in that journey together. So the issue is not forgotten. It just won't feature at the highest level in the strategy. So thank you, Councillor Rowlands.
Yes.
It's not amended, is it?
No. It's the amendment was agreed, so it's just...
The amendment was agreed.
There's no amendment on this one. It's just
Thank you. Members, are you happy to agree this proposal? Agreed? Do you want to show? Thank you. Thank you. It was a bit uncertain there. Thank you.
It's carried.
That's carried. Agenda item 13, I would like to invite Councillor Richard Wilson to introduce the report of the Governance Working Group and to move the recommendation therein. Councillor Wilson, would you like to introduce the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to present the report from the Governance Working Group. Firstly, I would like to pay tribute to the members of the Governance Working Group and the officers who support it. They have carried out their work diligently and respectfully, and contributed to the objective in the Council's strategy that we just heard of strengthening governance. I will only add a few brief comments to the report in the agenda pack. On the current rule for the use of casting votes by the Mayor and most chairs of committees in the event of a tie, the Council's decision-making is not compliant. At the moment, the casting vote must be cast in favour of the status quo. Any decision made this way is open to challenge, however. Good governance demands that decisions are made based on the evidence presented and the best judgment of the person casting the vote, not a fixed rule. The Governance Working Group conducted a thorough review of the Council's governance model. We considered changing from the executive system to the committees system. We considered various hybrid models involving changes to executive arrangements and some committees. After taking expert advice, we recommend relatively modest changes to executive arrangements. In meeting the objectives of the review, we needed to ensure that the cost of the system did not increase, disruption was kept to a minimum, and decision-making would not be unnecessarily delayed. We wanted to use cross-party groups of engaged councillors where possible too. This is the thinking behind the recommendation for task and finish groups of the executive, and an example of which was just agreed 2 agenda items ago. The resulting recommendations are guidance to the executive and leader. They have discretion on all executive arrangements as detailed in the Constitution. Please resolve to approve the changes to casting votes and note the result of the governance model review. Thank you.
Wilson, do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to second.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Do you have any comments, members? No.
So is that agreed, members?
The last one, yeah.
So you can go to here.
Is that agreed, members? Oh, yeah.
That's carried.
The motion is carried.
You're doing well.
Item 14, questions from councillors. I can advise that 2 questions have been received from councillor. Councillor Murray Rowlands, would you like to read out your first question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the portfolio holder please update the council on progress towards the art, culture and heritage strategy promised in the annual plan, as I remain concerned about the absence of arts and culture in the priorities of the council.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. I'm advised that the Leisure and Culture portfolio holder will respond to this question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Council's annual plan was only agreed last week at Executive and relates to commitments made for the financial year starting April 2024. However, I can confirm that discussions around the strategy have already commenced. The new cultural strategy for the borough includes arts and heritage and will provide an opportunity to draw together a range of cultural services the council offers. Such what happens at the theatre, the museum, our parks, open spaces and our community buildings, as well as other organisations offering cultural services in the borough. Given this is an objective for April 2024 onwards, it is a little early to provide feedback on progress. However, we will be taking regular progress reports to the P&F Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Skipper. Councillor Rowlands, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There have been some attempts to broaden the cultural basis of this authority One was to actually establish a film society and to seek support for that. Unfortunately, support was not forthcoming, and it's a disappointment. So can I ask the post holder whether some favourable view might be looked at when similar proposals for things like a film society are taken for consideration of funding?
The purpose of the new strategy is to encompass all arts, crafts and heritage organisations. So that will be part of the ongoing strategy that we're taking forward for 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Skipper, and thank you, Councillor Rowlands, for your question. Councillor Rowlands, would you like to read out your second question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Why, when the council has moved towards an operational strategy to support arts and culture in the borough, is there a move to increase the hire charge for space at Camberley Theatre for arts and cultural groups?
I'm advised that the Leisure and Culture portfolio holder will respond to this question. Councillor Skipper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think perhaps Councillor Rowlands is mistaken, as there are no increases in charges. The council is able to contribute positively to the council life of the borough through its discretionary services because of the income it receives through charges. Whilst it is important that these charges keep pace with rising costs, I am pleased to confirm that the room hire prices have not increased for 24-25 financial year to ensure the hire costs remain at market competitive levels.
Thank you, Councillor Skipper. Councillor Rowlands, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's possibly my misreading of the new budgetary proposals for the theatre, but I did see there were some additional charges being indicated for various of the activities. I apologise if I've misread that. But it is a fact that the sad history of arts and culture in this borough has meant that many of the artistic and cultural organisations in the borough have had to seek accommodation in assorted halls and those and that. So can he reinforce his view that no additional charge is going to be charged by the theatre for similar arts and cultural groups trying to get to use the theatre for this purpose, for their purposes?
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Would the portfolio holder like to respond to the question?
I'd like to pass that comment to Mr. Nick Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Skipper. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. I don't think that is something we can commit to. Clearly, the fees and charges are based on demand and comparators against other similar facilities. It's not appropriate for us to say that we will flatly not change our fee structure. We need to make sure it's competitive and also attractive, and clearly we need to ensure that we cover the costs of running the theatre as a venue.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, Councillor Skipper, and thank you, Councillor Rowlands, for your second question. Leaders' question time. I'd now like to invite members to ask questions of the leader, Councillor Sean MacDonald, on issues relating to executive functions. You will be aware that there is 20 minutes is allocated to the leader's question time. As usual, so that everyone can have a chance, I will try to ensure all members have had an opportunity to ask a first question before I invite you to ask a second question. So if you wish to ask more than one question, please prioritise a first question. Please also keep your introduction to your question as short as possible as we hear as many, so we can hear as many questions as possible. Can I now have the first question from members? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two, but I will give you the first one. I have prioritised. The second one's very short. It's been a very interesting evening. If I am honest, it is disappointing that many councillors in this administration open their mouths and all they do is slag off the previous administration, Conservatives and the government. I think we can all agree that is not why the residents of Surrey Heath elected us as councillors. I'm sure they elected us to do the very best for them in the chamber and within our wards. I would be interested to hear the leader if he agrees with me that the constant backstabbing and grandstanding is not good for the residents of Surrey Heath. At some point in the near future, this administration will need to start taking responsibility for its decisions it has made. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Garrett, for your question. This administration will be more than happy to take accountability for the decisions it makes. Equally, it's more than happy to hold others previously who made the decisions accountable for theirs.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the leader for his previous answer. Talking about accountability, do you think it's fair for us to point out that the majority of Conservative rank-and-file members voted for Liz Truss, who immediately crashed the economy and is now causing so much trouble, as we've seen from our budget discussions earlier? Or should we not mention that?
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. Apologies, Mayor. I was a bit fast out of the seat there. Thank you for your patience with me. I think it's fair for us to mention that when it's relevant to residents of Surrey Heath. The catastrophic offence has caused, the offence has very much been caused by Liz Truss, but the catastrophic consequences of the actions that she took in a relatively short number of days in power will unfortunately live with the residents of Surrey Heath for a long time.
Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to buck the trend here and ask questions regarding my ward. I want to thank officers and police for dealing with the situation in my ward promptly and professionally when there was an unauthorised encampment at Collingwood College. But am I please able to receive an update on the identification of suitable sites for the GRT community in Surrey Heath? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to defer this one to Councillor Alan Ashbury to answer.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mears. As you know, the local plan working group has been working very hard, not just in this administration, also in the previous administration, to identify suitable sites for the gypsy, traveller and travelling show people community. And we continue to do so. We are looking for sites. We are continually looking for sites. So as they become available, anyone in any ward that has any sites that they feel are suitable, please let us know and we will carry out the due diligence on whether they are suitable to be brought forward as sites for gypsy, traveller and travelling show people. That's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
A very quick question, because I know it's late, it's almost 10. I wonder if the leader will join with me in thanking the work of our corporate enforcement team in getting the derelict Victoria Court building on London Road demolished. It being unoccupied and an eyesore on a major road into Camberley for the last 5 years. And I'm really proud of the enforcement team working with us to get rid of that building and obviously clear the way for new housing. Now, I'm just wondering if the leader can give us an update on when we'll see the rest of the derelict buildings along London Road demolished, because those are actually owned by the council. And I hope, he'll be able to update us on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of our corporate enforcement team. I think they are doing a fantastic job, and the fact that that has been now completed, the demolition of Victoria Court, as you say, is a very positive thing. So congratulations to them, and thank you for bringing it to everybody's attention. In terms of the rest of London Road, we will have to come back to you on that. We have a briefing around the regeneration plan, I think, at the end of March, maybe, and that will give some insight. But I'm happy to put something down in writing if that's more appropriate. I also would just like to thank Councillor Mears for his previous question. It was a very timely and appropriate one. And yeah, we need to keep looking at these issues. Thank you for your patience, Mayor. Sorry I couldn't get in before to add on to Councillor Ashbury's comments.
Members, we've now reached 10 o'clock. Would you like to adjourn for a comfort break, or would you like to continue? In favour of continuing?
Continue till 10:30.
Yeah, that's carried. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Mayor. Much discussion this evening has taken place around the parking strategy. Will the leader give assurance that the parking figures will be reviewed after a 6-month interval and give some guidance to residents on the margin that would be used to decide whether decisions to reduce the free car parking period in rural car parks could be reversed to support our economy? Could he also give assurance that the working papers whereby we are considering parking charges at Lightwater Country Club and at Frimley Park will consider how overspill car parking will impact the local roads and residents, and how many of the sports clubs and society will look for alternative venues? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, for your question. We will continue to review the implementation of the parking strategy. The strategy obviously is the first step. The implementation, then we need to go through and deliver on what we've agreed. And part of that will also be to look at the implication, look at the facts and the figures. So we very much will look at that. In terms of the right format for that to bring it back to this group or a committee of the council, we'll have to exactly think about. It's likely, I suspect, to be through Mr. Stevens' portfolio reports. And the relevant colleagues, including Councillor Whitcroft as well. In terms of Lightwater and Frimley Lodge Park, there is nothing in the strategy at present to implement charges, so there's no need to answer that question. What we do need to do is understand exactly the conditions of those car parks and how we make them fit for the future. There may be implications of that for the finances, and we'll deal with that and come back in due course. But for now, the first thing is to get the facts on the table around how do we make those, what do we need, and how much will it cost. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the 28th of November 2023, Councillor McGrath was absent without apology from the External Partnerships Select Committee. On the 28th of November 2023, Windlesham Parish Council met, including Councillor McGrath. I think you were there in a named vote, voting in favour of a record-breaking 44.2% council increase. I wasn't going to mention it, but when a few people went off on one, I thought I might as well.
Councillor Lee, these are questions for the leader.
It's background to the question. It's background to the question,
councillor.
Madam Mayor.
Will you please address your question to the leader?
With pleasure.
Thank you.
Are there any practical powers this council has to call in the recent decision by the Conservative-led Windlesham Parish Council to increase the 2024-2025 precept by 44.2%, and without resident consultation? Obviously, as a borough council, if we wanted to propose that level of increase, we would have to consult.
Leader.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll have to take some advice on that, Councillor Lee, but I think we may have the option of requesting the chair of that group to come into external partnerships. Clearly, I couldn't do that, as I would have a conflict of interest, given that I will end up paying the 44% increase that's currently proposed by Wincham Parish Council, but other members could potentially do that, for example, yourself as the chair. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was on a similar vein to Councillor Wheeler's, but pertaining to the half-hour parking. I'm still getting correspondence from the elderly residents in the village, really worried about only having half an hour, and I, like Councillor Wheeler, would ask that this is looked at again at a later date and reported back to the village, because the residents are really, really concerned. These are pensioners. They're not the rich conservatives, or as you all keep referring to. They are concerned residents that cannot get round the village within half an hour. Doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. The parking is not always good at the doctor's or the dentist, and there is real concern within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. As I think I said before, we will look at the implementation of the strategy and see, and as always, try and make it as data-led as possible. And if there's further refinements to be done, then we'll take that opportunity. But thank you for your question. And yes, you're completely correct. Not all pensioners are wealthy, despite the triple lock. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. And I do have to follow on from Councillor Lee's question. I've always been interested in the idea of having a Camberley Town Council, but I kind of feel lucky now that I don't actually live in one of the parished areas if they can increase taxes by 44% without consulting residents. I'm just wondering if the leader could do a quick calculation and get back to me about how much extra money we'd have to spend if we increased our taxes by 44%. Thank you.
Well, clearly, I think in this environment... Oh, I'm terribly sorry, mate. I apologise. You have been giving me the nod and the wink every time, so I'll keep going. Councillor Quinn, yeah, listen, we wouldn't do that because we're responsible. And we wouldn't do it because we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. However, should Michael Gove and his friends in the relevant department wish to offer that kind of money to Mr Watson, I'm sure we'll find good uses for it.
Councillor Garrett.
I promise it's only a short one. And it relates to Surrey Heath, which is a bit of a bonus tonight, isn't it? I have been made aware this evening by local businesses that the signals for both 3 and EE plus others have suffered major outages over the last couple of days, which is affecting local businesses who rely on the Wi-Fi for card payment processing. I'm led to believe that this is an issue which has been caused by workmen on the roof of House of Fraser, where the receivers are situated. So I'm just wondering if that's something we're aware of, and if not, is it something we can look at? Thank you.
Thanks for bringing us back closer to home, Councillor Garrett. I was not aware of that. I'm not aware that anybody's been up on the roof of House of Fraser for reasons you're well aware around the asbestos and everything else, but I'm sure the relevant parties on the council side will look into it and we'll get back to you with the new normal timeframes. Thank you.
Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I ask the leader what new thinking the majority group are advancing to deal with the growing disappearance of shops and premises in the town centre, which is obvious to everyone?
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Broadly speaking, the stats are quite positive. The utilisation rates in the town are quite high within our own premises. I don't have data on, obviously, on the others. There is obviously some businesses go out of business, as some new businesses form. That is a bit of the cycle of life in business. Equally, this is probably the time of year where businesses would struggle the most, and I think we're seeing that with some of the announcements, for example, Body Shop, etc. And let's keep our fingers crossed that ours isn't one of those, but it's a bit of a flip of a coin at the moment. So we have a team that's very focused and dedicated on economic development, and obviously working with Councillor Fine and Cook on the details of how we can make best use of our assets, and we will keep that focus and keep that energy going in there. But retail is a fairly tough place to be at the moment, Councillor Rowlands. Yeah.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Mayor. Would the Leader of the Council join me in celebrating the grassroots involvement with local government and local decision making, and therefore welcome the fact that parish councils are able to make decisions, having been elected by their electorate, that affects their electorate, independence and externally of interference by either borough, county, or, although I have to be honest this evening, it's very difficult to imagine that this is something that can be supported, central government. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Councillor Garrett's more than welcome to answer the question. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think the principles of local people looking after their own destinies is something very much we as Liberal Democrats would believe in, and I know other members around this chamber as well. I think it is a little bit of a discontinuity that, for example, there is a cap on the borough, and quite a low cap, as everyone would appreciate in a high inflation environment that we know the causes of, because we might have mentioned her name a few times this evening. However, that doesn't exist for the parishes. So there is a little bit of anomaly there, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to raise it in due course with the relevant minister. Thank you.
Any further questions for the leader? No. That concludes the business of the meeting, and I would like to thank everyone